I'd like to call the meeting, special city council meeting to order. Roll call of Alderman.
Alderman Heisler.
Here.
Kinsella. Here. Holt. Schmidt. Here. Richowitz.
Here.
Randall.
Here.
Anthony.
Here.
Davidson.
Here.
Silsey. Hayden.
Here.
Seibert.
Here.
White.
Here.
Galletti.
Here.
Musgrove.
Here.
Orlett. Schneider. Here.
Alderman Stevie, they contacted both of our offices. I didn't personally hear from Alderman Holt, but I think they told me she's out of town, so those two will be excused. There was no staff mandated other than Emily. I encouraged Jamie, and she's here, and I wasn't surprised to see Harry, but if you please note that the rest of them were not mandated for this meeting tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, if you would please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As I stated, this is a special city council meeting, June 26, 2013. And as the agenda states, there's just really two major items on the agenda. And we're going to start tonight even before public participation because of this meeting. I think until we hear from this gentleman and see the presentation, there's really not a whole lot probably to comment on. So pertaining to tonight's meeting. So I'm going to ask Emily Foltz, our Director of Economic Development, to step forward to the microphone and tell you a little bit about what we're going to do here this evening and also introduce our guest.
Okay, well, as many of you know, we went out for qualifications last October to select a consultant to rewrite the city's comprehensive plan, which is a really exciting process. So we got a number of qualifications back to us over the winter and into the spring months. We completed interviews with the top 3 firms and ultimately selected what we believe is the most qualified firm, which is Ken Dinkeast Collaborative. Gary Mitchell is here tonight from Ken Dinkeast to give us a presentation on his firm and what the planning process will entail and some of the things they're going to be doing here in Belleville. So we're excited to have him, and unless you have any other questions for me, I would like to turn it over to Gary for the presentation this evening.
Gary?
Mayor, do I need to be microphone?
Yeah, it'd be best that way if you can, because it'll pick up for the tape. That might loosen up. I don't know. That's kind of tied in there, though. I don't know. Might not have a few feet.
Sure, sure.
Gary, which icon is over here?
It is the
Oh, it's minimized, I see it.
it's open there on the bottom.
Sorry.
Does it help if we turn on any of these lights or not?
As long as everybody can see.
You okay? All right.
Good evening, everyone. Mayor, council members, and members of the public here tonight. I'll give you a quick overview and certainly be here for discussion and questions. This was a theme that we used during our interview. We always like to have a theme to go with these long-range planning processes. We know the city is approaching a centennial point, an important point in your history and your future. So we've tied, just last year we did a plan that was tied to the city's celebration of its history and future. So next slide. But let me give you some background about us. I'll talk about the process that is ahead and entertain your questions. But as far as our firm, we are unique in that this is what we do every day. We work with cities. We work on their long-range planning. We also help with development codes, zoning, subdivision ordinances. We've been doing this since the early 80s. Our retired president now was based in the Chicago area, so that's the roots of our firm. We've worked with about 200 communities over the years. We work around the country. Right now we have projects from Idaho to South Carolina, Louisiana to Ohio. So we work around the country. But having said that, we are a small firm on purpose. There's only about 10 of us in our firm, which means I'm the vice president of the firm. The principals of the firm work with our clients, work on our projects. So I meant to say, by the way, I know several of you heard this presentation last night, so bear with me as we go through it one more time. But based on that history and our work, we do get a lot of attention in our profession, so we do like to think of ourselves as leaders. We publish and win awards for the communities that we work with. just a couple of years ago. Emily, next slide. Not too far away, the city of Carbondale. In 2010, when we finished their comprehensive plan, it was recognized as the best plan in Illinois that year. So it brought that recognition to the city. We do always team on these types of projects. We like to have a local firm, especially an engineering firm that can bring that technical support as needed, knowledge of the city's infrastructure and street systems. And also, Mind Mixer is more on the public outreach and involvement side. I'll talk more about them specifically later in the presentation. Just so you know more about me, the person that you will see at all the meetings that will be leading this effort. This is my 25th year of doing this type of work. Started in '89. In '99, after about 10 years in public sector work, chose to go into consulting, so I do bring that public background. This plan, if we are authorized to help you, will be the 37th of this type of plan, comprehensive plan for a city that I've worked on. Done work in about 15 states now. I mentioned our awards, but what comes with that is the variety of experience, different size cities, different settings, topography, the demographics, all those things. And the next slide actually listed some of the things that I've dealt with in these types of projects. We certainly work with cities that are growing very rapidly. We work with some cities that's because of the results of the BRAC process, cities that have a military installation nearby, and that coordination that's very important. Communities that have been sitting on the same population or even losing in recent years. We've dealt with that situation as well. In many cases today, cities are changing just the composition of the population and the implications there. Rapidly growing cities, annexation is often a big issue, but just as you look at your growth in the future, redevelopment of your older parts of the city and areas that are getting reinvestment. First-time zoning, I mentioned, impact fees, certainly property rights. These are some of the interesting things that we deal with. Annexation is probably the one that's the most intensive I've dealt with as far as packed council chambers and just working through the issues that the city has to deal with there. Just so you put some names to faces, these are other folks you'll see on our team that will be working with me, some of our support staff. So you'll see them at our public events as well. But when we launch into a process like this, it's recognizing where we are today, how you got to this point, but looking down the road, typically several decades, but we were just having a conversation that when you're talking about your infrastructure systems, your streets, your park system, those are things that are going to be in place for many decades for the long term. So we really are setting a course for far down the road. But then at the end of the day, coming back to the next few years and helping you set priorities on where to focus. These are issues that we're aware are front and center, that were put to us in the request for proposals, but certainly take care of your existing neighborhoods, some of the housing issues in Belleville as far as vacancy and just the variety of housing that's available. Everywhere we deal with economic development issues. I highlighted Lindenwood because in a lot of communities today, it's the labor force side of things that you have the education, the skills in place to retain and attract business. This is a community, one of the challenges we know we will have here is just the geography of Belleville, just the way the community is stretched out on the ground and different corridors. So just how those corridors develop and redevelop in some cases. Just the success of downtown and continuing to build on that. We've talked about communities that are away from interstates, the pros and cons that come with that, but having a strong downtown is certainly something to build on going forward. Transportation issues are core to all these comprehensive plans, but having transit in your community and things that can happen around transit stations. Parks and amenities, basically all the building blocks of communities and things that cities have responsibility for looking into the future. And finally, everywhere we work, residents, leadership is concerned about the image that you project and the aesthetics of the community. Belleville is certainly focused on that in recent years, so continuing that emphasis. Before anything happens, before we put a word on paper, before we're making presentations, recommendations, listening is the first step. Where is the community today? What are the concerns? What are the things you're dealing with? Opportunities and challenges. Next slide. That Latin phrase at the top is from St. Francis, Audi Altrum Partum. It means hear the other side. That's a basic part of our philosophy, that we're listening to all perspectives, what is driving the issues in your community, how do we tackle some of these. But when we get into our public involvement activities, we want to make sure it's meaningful activity. We like to do hands-on exercises, groups gathered around tables, maps of the city, involving all ages. We especially focus on your youth. And another theme is going to them. We can schedule a meeting here at City Hall or at a public facility. You've got to go to where folks already meet, where there's already networks in your community, your business community, different organizations. So that's part of our strategy as well. But some of these images, again, just highlight at all levels, from dealing with a large audience, a large event, to one-on-one interactions, small groups, just different ways to get people involved and have these long-range discussions. Let me talk briefly about MindMixer. MindMixer is a firm that's only been around a couple of years. We're working with them in several places. They were actually founded by folks like us who were frustrated with not being able to reach entire communities. Part of that is just how busy people are nowadays, but there's also the technology aspect, social media, Facebook, Twitter, all these things. What MindMixer does is sets up what they call a virtual town hall, and what they've shown with their numbers is we've been successful at drawing 400, 500, 600 people to a large public event. They turned it into the thousands through online dialogue. And we've talked about that those are hard to reach people in some cases, but part of doing that, we know, is you got to manage that dialogue and make sure it's on target, that it's focused to the purpose of this plan and process. So MindMixer is part of that process. You have our detailed scope of work that we've laid out on how we would tackle this project. I've tried to boil it down to this one image, basically 6 steps that we will work with your staff, with your leadership to kick off this process. It is all about building on existing plans, your parks plan, your infrastructure planning. We're not here to duplicate effort. We purposely want to avoid that. The favorite part of our job is learning about new communities that we work with, so we really dig into the city and learn the history and what's ahead, your issues. Engagement, all those items I just mentioned. And one thing I hit on last night, I want to mention again, is we always encourage staff, elected officials, others, that when you're in public events like this, to listen, let people talk, understanding that we are going to hear total misperceptions, that the city isn't doing this or we're not addressing something. We need to hear that. We need to understand that that's what people think, then work toward correcting that perception and showing how we're dealing with things now and going down the road. Then we go into the phase where we're really putting the document together, the drafting phase, item 4. That's where CPAC is Conference Plan Advisory Committee. We typically work with a representative committee that includes some elected officials, planning commissioners, but other representatives of your business community and the public at large, and make sure that the plan is coming together, that it's on target with Belleville's needs. But getting to a point of strategy, I mentioned pulling back to the next several years, while we're also looking farther down the road, but getting down to specific options, priorities in the years ahead. And then from day one, it's the final step of the process, but from the day we start, we're thinking about how do you make these things happen. It's not just about putting goals and words on paper, it's how do you make things happen. So, next slide. This is kind of shifting to that aspect of once you have a plan, what's next. We don't leave you with just that document. This is part of our philosophy as well, is what do you do once you have this document adopted by council? And we consider this kind of the nuts and bolts of this process, the very end stage, and it's where you make your to-do list. It may involve reinforcing things you're already doing, new priorities that have come along with your opportunities. This is an example from another community where on one page back and front, there's 14 areas for action, and it's what's needed, why, what's happening in the community that makes this a priority, who needs to carry it out, and when. Is it the next couple of years, a few more years down the road, or something that we may not get to for 10 years or more, but it's out there, we know it's on the horizon. We know there's things that dictate some of these priorities. The feds or the state may tell you as a city that you have to do certain things, so that's part of the mix. But we want to leave you with indicators to monitor over the years, so you see if you're on target, if you're accomplishing these things, and then ways to keep that plan relevant. Just another example of laying out a program tied to a timeline. I put the traffic signals there. We talked about this last night, that I had one city manager who asked us to use this traffic signal theme partly about consensus. And what he was saying was, if there's an action in the plan and it has a green light, it means go. People are behind it, we have a way to fund it, we can get it done. Then there was kind of that middle ground, yellow light, yeah, we need to do it, we may not be ready, but it's there. Red light, don't even go there. It's not supported, we don't have the resources, it's not a priority. So the plan was based on that kind of categorization of action. So there is also a first shot at laying out the schedule. It's meant to be about a one-year process, and this is just some of the highlights, especially to highlight where the outreach activities would happen. Basically, we're looking at the fall timeframe, September, doing a first round of public workshops, and these are really tied to the neighborhood focus that Belleville already has established. And we've encouraged, working with the city, that the workshops will happen in different parts of the community. It's that theme again of going to them. And as I said, we know Belleville is spread out, has different areas, different neighborhoods. But in November, a second round, as we're working into that plan, and some of the specifics are getting onto paper. And then next spring, a third round where the overall draft of this plan will be coming together, but working our way toward roughly this time frame next summer of seeing if we're ready to go to public hearing and bring this for consideration. What we found is we do some plans faster than a year and typically get some pushback that you're going too fast, we need more time to digest this, but you don't want to let this process stretch out too much and lose momentum. So, at the end of the day, we are here to help, to assist with this process, with the plan. It's your plan, it's not our plan. Our role is to facilitate this process. We do some education along the way, what options are, what other cities are doing on these issues. With our public sector background and just working with you, we do try to bring a reality check to this, that we're going to think big early on, but bring it back to the ground. Build consensus and ultimately prepare for action. That's the purpose of this process, not just to produce a document. So, final slide, we sum it up here. This is what it's about. It's partly about us and making sure we have a good community to live in, but that's the long term. That's where we're going. So with that, Mayor, I'll stop there and be ready for any questions.
Emily, do you want to, or will you, maybe the next step, I guess the next step I'll do is say that all of you should have a copy of the contract. I'm going to let Garrett just put his 2 cents in here that he did read.
Yes, Emily did send me the professional services agreement. I reviewed it. I made a few minor revisions to extend the payment terms consistent with the Local Government Prompt Payment Act, and I found it to be suitable for approval by the City Council as to form. And I know that it's got a termination for convenience clause, so it's got a 7-day out clause for the city, so the city's interests are protected in that respect as well.
And Emily, do you, I mean, you and I both talked, and Jamie's here. For those who, I think Emily hit it a while ago. We've been talking about this for probably at least, what, last year and a half to 2 years. I think Garrett can also state or back me up here. You know, I realized, I always knew that this master plan or comp plan was very important, but about a year ago or so when we were in a trial, it was amazing how many times they referred back to the comp plan. And I was quickly reminded, sitting there for several days and being on the witness stand, of the importance of an up-to-date comprehensive plan, plan to work on. The plan that we are still working off of is about 1999, I think, is that correct? I know some of us, well, I guess I'm the only one left here. From that council, I was about 2 years on the council at that time. And we've worked through many of those goals and objectives. And it's time to freshen and look forward and beyond. And I think one of the neat things, when I talked to Gary the other day, I think it is exciting, and it's kind of coincidental, but it's very appropriate, that as we really dive into this, we're on the eve of our 200th anniversary. And it's an awesome opportunity to look back at our history, to look at where we are today, and then to dream and to forecast where we want to be the next 10 to 20 years. So it's a great planning tool, and I think that we know it's time. We wanted to do it sooner, but it just things weren't just all coming together. But now we're here, and so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go back following the agenda here. If Emily doesn't have anything else to add at this moment, and I'm going to open if anybody from the public has any comments, and then we'll open it up to the council participation here in just a moment. Does anyone this evening wish to comment anything? Yes, sir, Mr. Brown.
Rick Brown, 618 South Pennsylvania Avenue, Belleville. I'd love to see this, I really do. I think to get a professional person here that knows zoning and what is allowed under zoning and what isn't, and I think it'd be a great thing for them. We've got some good things in Belleville, but we've got some bad things that have happened in Belleville using the zoning ordinance that hopefully I can bring to his attention. You know you're effective when you say something that really gets into somebody's gut. When Mr. Sabo sends every housing inspector he's got to my properties within 48 hours of the last council meeting, and didn't find anything. And really makes you feel good that people like to get a little revenge. But that being said, if you approve this man to do the comprehensive plan, I'm going to make him aware of some of the regressions that the city has made with the zoning ordinance over the last 15 years. And I certainly hope that the new comprehensive plan doesn't allow the city to steal any more people's property by retroactively rezoning it and then not allowing the people to use the property for the use that it was originally zoned. Because that has to be addressed. The downtown streetscape looks beautiful. We've got nice parks. We've got a lot of good stuff here. We've got infrastructure problems that are really problems, but we seem to be sending all our tip money to rich businessmen to get richer. But I'll be glad to help him and maybe get some information to him that he needs to know about all the vacant properties that we've got in town, that the only reason that they're vacant is because they were retroactively rezoned illegally. And Mr. Horner, can I ask him some questions?
This is a chance for you to publicly.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess there's going to be a few aldermen and some other elected officials that will. Can they ask them, Mr. Horner, for legal advice? Are they allowed to?
The council can always ask them.
Well, I mean, if the individual aldermen sign a letter, I've got some specific questions, and you seem like a nice guy, Mr. Horner. You haven't been part of that problem. You just got in here. But we're going to see how good of a jurist you are, because there's some questions that need to be answered about the retroactive rezonings, the retroactive lot size increases, not allowing people to use property that was already platted, and retroactive permitted use ordinances that took away property from commercial, light and heavy commercial that was multifamily. Thank you.
Next gentleman.
Michael Hagberg, 701 Centerville. Some of the tasks in this proposal under the GIS, the consultant will inform the soon-to-be hired full-time GIS employee earning $52,000 a year to get the current GIS maps from the county. I'm thinking that anybody setting up GIS database knows that the existing maps are at the county. Under the community background, the consultant will review the 1999 plan and list accomplished projects along with projects that are still waiting to be started and those projects that should be forgotten altogether. I would hope that our AICP certified economics and planning director, who earns $75,000 a year, would be able to read the previous report and categorize these projects. Under community engagement, the consultant will use the website to solicit general comments from the public. A year ago, we approved $42,000 for a new website. To this day, the public must travel to City Hall to view a meeting packet placed on the counter for to know what's going on for detailed meetings. Unlike a website, this packet's only available during business hours. Having viewed the current progress of the new website, I'm not sure that it will be implemented before the year 2035. This expenditure of $193,000, which is 30% more than budgeted, for consultants to assist the creation of a report that won't give us any more information than should be available from our own staff. Please prioritize our limited funds and vote against this waste of money for outside consultants. Thank you.
Anyone else this evening? Hearing none, I'm going to close public participation. And at this time, I will open up comments or questions from the council for either Gary or Emily or I or whatever. And we'll go from there before we place it, ask for a vote. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I've got quite a few. I think we all should have been given one, this is what I was given from the City Hall from the year 2000, to have a chance to read it before we had to vote on all this. I picked this up yesterday and just thumbing through it. This is one of the things that was not addressed. It's not been done with the last thing. It says, investigate and develop a community recreational complex to include an ice rink, outside water park, pool, gymnasium, the basketball and volleyball courts, indoor walking track, etc. A private venture is encouraged to take advantage of the community development assistance. So how many things in this one was not accomplished? We are right now sitting without a Belleville City swimming pool, which I think is all wrong. We knew back then we needed to do this. And then the price for this, $193,542. I think that money could go to some really sewer work, sidewalks, streets, things that need for the people to get around in our city. You can have a park, you can have all the fancy things, but if you don't have the stuff to get there, it's not going to work. And then, do the people even realize, because of the long-term control plan for our sewer department, do they know what the minimum sewer rate is going to be in the year 2028? It's going to be $56.80. We're spending money, $193,542 on something that could go to better use. I just, in good conscience, for the constituents in my ward, I have to say no to this. This is wrong. We have one that we already have, and how many things were completed in it before we go venturing, doing a new one. And that's all I have, unless I think it's more, I'll raise my hand.
Next. Alderman Hayden.
First question, where was your previous municipal work at?
All around the country.
But you said you worked in the public sector.
Oh, myself, yes.
Yes.
Worked for a county in New York, worked for a regional council in the Houston area, similar to the East West Gateway.
And you went to which school?
Went to undergraduate at the University of Texas, graduate at Texas A&M University.
Okay, great. And you did the study down at Carbondale?
Yes, our firm did.
Okay. What have you seen? You mentioned about vacancy of houses and basically how the plan can help promote the growth of the city. What specific things have you seen and your previous plans suggested to do that, knowing that we have in the city of Belleville a lot of vacant houses in the city of Belleville? We're at the point, some may want to disagree with me, but people can't even get loans to buy houses because the lending institution is basically stating that this is a bad investment. What things have you seen and suggested through your comprehensive plans, and where have you seen them actually work to change that?
On housing and all issues, our starting point is data, housing market data to understand the situation. That's where we saw the relatively high vacancy number. And then it's understanding the things that you control and don't control. You mentioned mortgage financing, for example. What can the city and other potential partners do in an area? There are mechanisms from other levels of government, grants that are out there, but at the local level, zoning has been mentioned. There is a neighborhood focus here through neighborhood planning typically. That's where you get into the specifics of capital improvements. Is it things like parks? Is it the education system? All these factors that other players may influence, not just the city. So that's our starting point, is understanding what's driving the issue before we get into specifics. In Carbondale, in a university situation, that was a major driver. It was student housing coming into established neighborhoods. So in each case, you got to figure out what's driving the problem, what drivers can you as a city or as a community influence. The one other I'll mention is military communities. Working with a community that was a winner in the BRAC process, has a growing base, just providing for housing for the average infantry person, but also the officers who didn't want to live in that community, they were going elsewhere. So how can you attract the officer level to stay in your community, to bring those dollars and spending to your community? So I know I covered a lot of stuff there, but it varies by community, what's driving the situation in your city.
Because, people don't want to admit the facts, but, some of it has been stated that, we are in a military community, and Belleville has been described, unfortunately, in some sectors as being quote-unquote blackballed. You don't want to go to Belleville. We need to change, as you showed up there on that screen, that image, and that's certainly one of the goals that I want to see out of this. You mentioned you want to dig into the city, piggybacking on Alderman Schneider's question. How much have you looked into the previous plan that is in existence now to study what we've accomplished and not accomplished, and why? Because you made a statement last night, and I agree. The last thing we want to do is spend over $100,000 for a plan that's going to sit on the shelf. The question that I would like to know is how much, from your perspective, have you seen, or will you be able to tell us, of the previous plans actually set on the shelf?
Yes, and you mentioned a key word, it's the why. And I know there was a statement earlier about looking at the previous plans. We're not going to sit here and prepare a list of what's in those plans, what's been done, what's not. That's not what we need to be doing. It's for our background. And part of your question was, have we looked at it? We looked at it in preparing for the interview process. So took a first look. Now, if we were to get into the project, it's the question of why. Why haven't certain things happened? As I mentioned earlier, in some cases it's because other people are setting priorities for you, where the city has to spend its money, mandates that have to be dealt with. In some cases, it's things change over time. Different opportunities come along. There's been a big focus in recent years on sidewalk improvements around schools, safe routes to schools. Why? Because there was a great new pot of money from the federal government that had very limited matching requirements. So a lot of cities, all of a sudden, that was a priority for them when it hadn't been before. So priorities shift from year to year. These plans are meant to look down the road, but you still have your annual budget process, your capital improvements planning. That's where you set things in motion.
Yeah, listening last night, the chairman of the planning commission, which is a good friend of mine from high school, made a statement that this is really our business plan, and I concur. I understand some of Mr. Agberg and Alderman Schneider's concerns as it relates to cost and such. But the bottom line is, if I'm not mistaken, Mayor, that we are mandated by statute to basically do this. So this is something not only do we have to do by law, but it's a good thing. If we do it right, it is a good thing. The concern one of the concerns is though, if this is our business plan, you know, I just want to throw this out there. You know, I've only had 48 hours to study this business plan. And we're going to be voting tonight. I don't, if I was doing my own business, and I think if you were doing your own business, you may, I think you'd spend more than 48 hours. So once again, I just want to state for the record, Mayor, I think we need to, you know, we've got to take a little bit more time on these things before we make these decisions and make sure we're making them intelligently. Have you looked at the pool issue? Are you aware of the pool issue within the city, that we have no pool? We need to come up with a pool, not only a pool, but a bigger pool, a water park pool, and it ain't gonna fit where the old one was, and it needs to be somewhere in an area that can also attract hotels.
Absolutely. Know about it generally. It's a concern in most every community we work in. Should we have a community pool? Multiple? Can we maintain it? What's the best location? Is there parking? What's the impact on the neighborhood? Can it tie into economic development and neighborhood improvement? So, very common issue.
Now you, with SIU Carbondale down in Carbondale, which I spent quite a bit of time down there, it had me fun working with that city because it's a very progressive city, having ADA sidewalks probably before many major institutions did, and obviously the student clientele keeps their downtown business district vibrant, even with the mall on the outside of the community. I know that with Lindenwood and even with Swick, we're not going to have 20,000 students living in Belleville, but is it in your plans to show us how, with the progression of Lindenwood, that we can possibly turn that into even making the downtown that's beginning to be vibrant even more vibrant?
Yeah, I think anytime you have institutions like a college, university, military, especially at the edge of the community or beyond, and they're likely using your roads, they may be using your parks, or ways to draw them into the community, hopefully as residents if they are needing to live away from campus or need off-base housing. So absolutely, it's an untapped market in most communities. One of the things you mentioned earlier on the housing issue, I mentioned this in an earlier conversation today, that many cities talk about downtown housing. It just takes the first person as an investor to do it and show it's successful, and then you've got a precedent, and others tend to come in. It doesn't work everywhere, but that's where city government can play a role of trying to point toward the opportunity and whatever tools are available to encourage.
You know, in my understanding from my own experience working in government, the comp plan is basically an overlay, some could regard as a sub-plan for your zoning plan. Mr. Brown brought up his statements and concerns, and some of those issues that he's brought up are indeed compelling as it relates to what we may have done or may not have done with certain zoning within the city. But then on the other scale, you're always going to have this complex issue, especially in an older city of the city of Belleville, 200 years old. You know, you got right across from my house a duplex. You know, but yet it's now zoned A1, which is single family, and you know you've got your, you know, you've got some people that advocate mixed use is good and good if it's done right, but then you've got your purists to say, you know, single family needs to be single family, mixed use needs to be here, commercial needs to be there. How much experience have you worked with that, and what is your personal view of how to tackle those dilemmas?
Work on it pretty much every day. It's an issue in every community, old and new. The new that are trying to encourage mixed use from scratch, and older cities that may be wanting to encourage that in older neighborhoods or absolutely do not want it. That's part of the planning side of the process before you get to regulatory specifics, is where is the community? And especially when you've got the neighborhood focus here and you can drill down a little bit more, what are the desires of particular parts of town, what's the market realities, what's driving change in housing or lack of change in housing. So just the parcel pattern in a neighborhood, lot sizes, can drive what can happen, whether you can combine lots, all those kind of issues. So we're not at that level of specifics in the comp plan, but we're at the point of what's holding you back from things you'd like to accomplish, or what are things you want to accomplish that you don't have the tools to get there today.
One last thing, you mentioned,
If I could mention, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
Mr. Alderman. You mentioned my personal viewpoint.
Yeah,
We will make observations during this process, but I'm not here to drive an agenda. I'm not here to say this is the way it's got to be.
no, I agree with that, but I do want to hear your expertise.
Absolutely, but I just want to mention that because we are often called in to work on plans where a consultant was run out of town because they had a certain philosophy and this is how it needs to be in your city, when they're from who knows where. I'm here to help the process, I'm here to understand, but this is your community, and I'll give my observations, as you mentioned, expertise, what's happening in other communities, but that's where it stops.
When you came here, you said you've done 37 plans. When you came into our city and looked at it, and I'm going to take away one possible answer, knowing that it's pointed out very truthful, you know, the city of Belleville is longer than the city of St. Louis is wide. When you came here and looked at the city, what would you say the three most unique and/or challenging aspects of looking at the city of Belleville as a whole that you saw?
I guess I can't have 48 hours to think about that, but I'll try and answer it quickly. First impressions, because that's what we asked.
And that's my whole goal, because your first impression of anything, that's why I asked, I'm not trying to be unfair, but your first impressions of what you see gives a perspective of what can we do with this city, because you had to be thinking of that right as you were starting on your plan to present to the planning commission.
Distance from interstate. We were familiar with Fairview Heights. I've never been to Belleville before, but when you're looking at ways to get here, especially with the interstate farther north, that's a first impression. So then I've mentioned in other discussions that it's a city where I've got to have a map in front of me because I'm not always sure when I'm in or when I'm out with neighboring cities. When you see certain areas because of terrain or whatever that aren't developed within your developed city, immediately I want to know why. In some cases it's donut holes is the term in some places, islands, unincorporated areas. So we want to know the history there. If it's terrain, is it just basic service issues? It's always going to be hard to develop. Is there a history of why certain areas didn't come into the city? Downtown struck us immediately. And I understand, like a lot of communities, this downtown had its rougher times. It looks great today, very impressive driving in. What I mentioned earlier about needing that map and not always knowing where you are, you know where you are when you come down and through Swansea and you hit the entry to the city. You know this is Belleville. That's very impressive. The historical districts, I think I'm exceeding my 3.
That's all right.
But these are some of the things that struck us, and then as we went farther south, some of your new retail, that certainly brings revenue to drive amenities for your existing city and for new residents, but seeing subdivision activity on the edge of town and some of the issues. We've talked about older neighborhood issues, infill, redevelopment, mixed use. On the edge of town, you've got folks that want more of a rural atmosphere, but new housing needs and new subdivision development. So we tend to see somebody used the term treasures that we were talking to, but we also see the rough spots, the frictions, where things, duplex versus single family, new subdivision versus old farmstead. What are some of those interfaces between change and established? I think I'll stop there. I could probably go on.
Your Honor, like I said, I do wish I had a little more time to review it, but and I certainly understand the concerns of those as it relates to money and objectives. But this is a state-mandated objective. This is something that has to be done. listening last night to the Plan Commission, and some of the members are here. I want to compliment them on their work going through. Obviously, we had a multitude of people that responded to the RFQ, which is good. They picked the top 3, they narrowed it down to this one, and I'm looking forward to doing whatever I can to help this process and work with them. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I just have a question for all of you. You're saying mortgage loans are blackballing mortgages in Belleville because they say Belleville is a bad investment. Who said that?
I can prove it to the house right across the street.
I mean, did you have a bank that said that?
I can prove it with the house across the street.
Okay, and then the Air Force is blackballing Belleville? And do you approve of that too? Could you share that? I mean, I think everybody would like to know that. I mean, that's stunning that mortgage companies are blackballed and say Belleville's a bad investment.
Yes, it's if you're not aware of that, then you need to get in tune with the public and what's going on. I'm not going to sit there and air out all the various things going on, but these are things that are going on. And it's called being honest with yourself. So yeah, it happened with the house across the street from me.
Okay, what bank was it?
I don't know, and I wouldn't mention it if I did.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And excuse me for asking this question, but are we are budgeted for this, right?
We're budgeted, and Jamie, why don't I ask Pat Juanita? I asked you to come, so let her explain how we did this.
Okay, as previously mentioned, this process started quite a while ago. So there was an amount budgeted last year. We thought it would get some payments made, the ball moving a little bit sooner than it did. So we had $50,000 in last year's budget.
Of the general fund.
The general fund, that we thought would be spent by the end of April. It was not. So we had budgeted in this current year $150,000, 50 out of the general fund, 100,000 out of the various TIFs, proportionate to their size. So we definitely this year have 150,000 budgeted. Again, 100,000 out of various TIFs, 50,000 out of the general fund. We saw from his timeline it will roll into the next budget year, so we can make that final payment, on top of the 150,000 after May of next year, put it in next year's budget, or we can do a budget amendment, because again, it was in last year's budget, it didn't get used. We can roll it into this year.
And we checked with the TIF consultant, and the way we divided it is upon his recommendation and upon looking in with the attorney, making sure that we didn't take too much from TIF, but we felt that with the number of TIFs that cover the city, proportionately figured out with working with Emily, and we feel very comfortable about the split that we did.
Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Randall?
Yeah, thank you, sir. My question is for the city attorney, Mr. Horn. You said that you were making some minor revisions to the agreement, and with respect to how we're paying for this in the budget, the period of time that we're going to pay over.
Oh, it was actually the period of time that you have to pay following invoice. The contract originally said 30 days, payment within 30 days of invoice, but the Local Government Prompt Payment Act, which is an Illinois statute, contemplates that you have 30 days to approve an invoice and then 30 days to pay it. So the changes were already made to make that payment period 60 days.
And those changes are acceptable to?
As he said, he's in a lot of different states, so this just reflects the law of the state of Illinois. Right?
That's right.
Okay. Any other questions before I repeat? Okay. Anybody? Okay, Alderman Schneider, I'll give you another copy.
Yes. Mine still comes down to the amount of money. I think this is a lot of money, and come September, we're probably going to be asking our taxpayers to redo the sunset clause and keep the 0.25% sales tax, which the people are under the impression that that's going to be gone. And here we're spending almost $200,000 for someone to come give us suggestions of how and what we can do with our city when, like Mr. Hayden said, we only had, not even, if we go by the clock ticking, I did not have mine until almost 7:30, quarter to 8. So you really don't have time to read a whole lot before you get yourself ready for bed and get up to go to work the next day. And then I got to thinking, what about our old one? How much of this was even accomplished or done or anything? How many of the other aldermen have even looked at something like this, the old one? I mean, I just think it's a lot of money, and I think we need to wait. My next question is, which I have to ask Mr. Hayden on this, Alderman Hayden on this one, or the city attorney. Is this mandated by law that we have to have a comprehensive plan? Where is that coming from?
Section 5-12-11 of the municipal code contemplates that the planning commission actually recommends.
Recommends, it's not that it has to.
No, they recommend a comprehensive plan for your approval. You're the ultimate authority approving it. You have one, but it also contemplates from time to time that the plan be modified and updated, over the course of time, and that's why it's commonplace for municipalities in the state of Illinois to do that.
So we would not have to stick almost $200,000. We could take this one and have our economical development planner go through this and see what we can do and update it a little bit until there is more money. The economy is not that good to be spending money, $200,000 for someone to come in and tell us how or what we can do, or suggest, I guess I should use the word, with our city. I just think this is a lot of money wasted.
Gary, do you want to comment something?
It's a community decision how much to put towards these projects. We do expert witness work as well on zoning cases. The first thing an attorney, and I'm not an attorney, one of the first things they look at in challenging a zoning decision, for example, is the plan from late 1990s, is it relying on the 1990 census data? Is it out of date, basically? Is it out of tune with trends in your community? They're gonna, I think you mentioned this, Mayor, they're gonna look at that. That's your policy basis for regulating private property. So they do hone in on that. And then it's how have you applied the plan? If the plan really doesn't reflect what's happening in real estate and development in your community, that can be a concern.
And I will tell you, and I'll take another question here, many developers who come to visit us want to know, one of the first questions is, can we get a copy of your comprehensive plan? Because they want to see our roadmap. They want to see our vision and our plan of where we're going. And they look at that and compare that to their business plan and see if there's a fit. Am I correct? Emily, you had a comment a minute ago. You want to answer? I think you have a question to speak to.
I know a couple people said they didn't receive this until 48 hours ago, but I sent an email out with all these documents at least 2 weeks ago. I know a lot of you contacted me and told me you got it, so I'm sorry if you didn't. But it was sent out 2 weeks ago. I wanted to provide ample time to read these documents, so I'm sorry.
And I know she did because she came into me and said, I'm getting this out at least 2 weeks ahead of time. And I believe this council very, very much, almost unanimously, has said email is the preferred way to communicate these things. So it's been available. And as far as the old plan go, many of the aldermen in this room I know have picked them up in the past. If we didn't talk about it in the, I'm almost positive, Emily made mention of it when we had orientation. Every one of the years I've offered orientation.
It's on our webpage, on the economic development and planning portion of the city's webpage. It's posted there. I know I don't know what we've talked about as far as what's been completed tonight, but our old plan calls on improving downtown infrastructure. We've done that over the recent years. Finding a reuse for Belleville West High School, that's happened, and now we have
Route 15 corridor.
tremendous opportunity, the Route 15 corridor. Continuing to improve our combined sewer overflow situation. We're working on that. Taking 17th Street through to Route 15. I mean, there are a number of things we can point to that have been done, and we need to take another look ahead as to what's next for us. So,
Mr. Randall.
Yeah, Emily, and I would support Emily's, position that email was sent out. Okay, she had even offered, paper copies to be delivered, and I requested one, and I had a paper copy, in my packet for the last city council meeting as well. The revisiting last night's overview that took place in the planning commission. I think one of the important things is when come out of this study is the mapping that is going to be done, the overlays that we'll be able to have at our disposal. You know, last night I mentioned, and I think Gary's been taking into consideration, that we're not just looking, okay, at our sewer lines, utilities, and that sort of thing, but I also asked him to include, okay, the various coal mines that this city has been built upon so that we know what we're getting into in terms of whether it's the Route 15 corridor or any place else, what are we capable of actually achieving there based upon these overlays that will be part of this process here. So I'm kind of excited about, you know, what this plan is going to be bringing to the table in terms of the future of Belleville. And I don't know if there are other questions or comments there from other council members, but I'd be ready to entertain.
Good. Okay, Eric had a comment. I'll certainly recognize Eric's been on staff for a long time.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that many times in grant applications, they ask, specifically they ask, is this project identified in your comprehensive plan? And they always want to see actually a copy of the plan. So I'm working on a grant application right now. I had to go into the plan and highlight the page and all that stuff from that specific project. So
I'm glad you came forward because I was just going to mention the grants. So, very good. Thanks, Eric. Is there anyone else from the council before I ask for a motion? I'm asked now for a motion to approve the contract with Kennedy Keast Collaborative for the completion of the city's comprehensive plan as spelled out in the contract in front of you and recognizing the financial amount and the terms that are in that contract.
And the changes suggested by the city.
They're already in there. They've already been made.
Yeah.
They're already in there.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion by Alderman Hayden. We have a second by Alderman Seibert. Is there any further discussion from the council? Roll call.
Alderman Heisler.
Aye.
Kinsella.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
Ridgewitz.
Aye.
Randall.
Aye.
Anthony.
Aye.
Davidson.
Aye.
Hayden.
Aye.
Seibert.
Aye.
White.
Aye.
Galletti.
Aye.
Musgrove.
Aye.
Orlett.
Aye.
Schneider.
No.
Ayes have it. Time to get started. Okay. We have one more item of business this evening, and I'd ask for a motion to read by title only Resolution Number 3141.
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Anthony. Do I hear a second? Second by Alderman Schmidt. All in favor of reading this reading Resolution 3141 by title only, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution number 3141, a resolution of authorization for the City of Belleville's application for Illinois Department of Natural Resources for 2013 open space lands, acquisition and development, grant funding.
Do I hear a motion to approve that resolution? Motion by Alderman Seibert, second by Alderman Heisler. Any discussion? Yes, sir.
What land are we talking about here?
Eric, you want to go ahead and explain the application?
we're submitting an application for a development project at Bicentennial Park. To be construction of a new playground, nature-themed playground similar to the one that's at Kimball Plaza, a little bit more expansive, some more amenities there. A picnic shelter, a log cabin for an interpretive center where we can do educational programs and other events, you know, weddings or parties, things like that. A half-mile trail around the biggest lake that would be paved, asphalt, and then eventually it would tie into the bike trail that we have planned to go through there as well.
And it would meet the ADA.
And of course, it's all ADA accessible. And picnic benches, another what they call a play pod is a smaller play area kind of all along the trail as well. Picnic tables, some bench swings, a couple other items, RT grills, things like that.
Colorado?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Who can give us an update in terms of where we stand in terms of from remediating the flooding problems that we're having at Bicentennial Park?
We're working on that right now, Alderman Randall. Tim's not here tonight. I didn't anticipate that was going to be a specific question tonight. He'll be here Monday night. We've been constantly monitoring. The IEPA was out there. He can address that Monday night. They had very few, next to no recommendations. We're constantly working on it. We've had some exceptional rains. We have, we're evaluating the changes we've made to the land with the new work. And we know we've had a couple of 5-inch rains that have been very unusual and have caused the area from the creek there that it's caused erosion and blowout there on more than one occasion. We believe we have it. We believe we're getting to the core of the problems, but it's a unique thing when you're dealing with large volumes of water, heavy rains, more than usual, and water has a lot of force. So Tim, I think, is going to be able to better address that next Monday night, and he's prepared to.
Could we be assured, okay, that we wouldn't be putting in playground equipment or other infrastructure until we get the problems remediated?
Well, yeah, first of all, let me say, this park application, it's a process that takes some time, right, Eric? And sometimes we're not even successful in the first round, but you got to get in front of them to start to compete. So we felt, the staff and I felt that this was a good application in that the bicentennial celebration and this council has agreed to use any proceeds from that towards that park. So we felt that if we're fortunate enough, either this round or the next round, to get such a grant, we can do another sizable amount of improvements. But I can tell you, we're working on correcting this permanently. It's just, it's when you're dealing with nature and you're dealing with change, there are some things that sometimes throw you some curves. Mother Nature isn't always fair. But we are working very diligently, and we're consulting with a lot of people. And we're taking a lot of things in consideration as we try to solve this permanently. But certainly before we start the next phase of construction, we're gonna not do that until but this could be a number of months away before we even hear if we made this ground.
We applied at this time last year for Southside Park, and it was just approved.
Yeah, so it's many times we're a year out, Alderman. Yeah. Alderman Schneider.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Is it gonna be like, okay, let's say we get a $100,000 grant, we're gonna spend 2-point-something million for something that, just in order to get a $100,000 grant, we're gonna have to spend that much extra?
It's a 50%, the grant is 50, sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to give you the facts that.
And it stated that the walk trails and that do not flood, but they do. Here's pictures. Now the picture of the sink, I don't know if the sewer backed up into it or someone cleaned a fish or what they did, but it looks horrible. And
Is this in the restroom?
Yes.
Well, I can say this, we'll certainly, the parks are out there almost every day. I will ask them tomorrow morning to make sure they check those restrooms, but I think we all know, and I think first of all, anytime I go by there, there's been a nice amount of people using that new park regularly.
Yes,
But
okay.
and the public's not always, all the members of the public are not always extremely competent in their cleanup behavior.
But this was right after, this was the other morning, right with the flood, Monday morning. I was out there.
I saw you turned right in front of me about 5 to 6.
And my next thing is, the water sits in front of the restrooms. This is a swampland out there. It always has been and it always will be. And you talk about fishing, I guess it really looks like you just pull your car up to the lake and get out. Don't park in the parking lot, just pull the car right up. Now that's on Channel 4's news. White car right up by the lake, get out and start fishing. I mean,
If we find that, Alderman Schneider, we're not going to tolerate it. They're going to have to park in the park. I mean, you're expressing concern when we understand that everyone who comes uses the parks may not have the best judgment.
a person could not have left this in the sink. Now that's gross. The water over the walking trails. This is in front of the doors where evidently the mud and everything washes up when it rains. There's no drains in this. I mean, when we overpaid for this property, but that's water over the bridge. But we keep spending and spending money on this park that is ridiculous. The money that we spent on this would have been a nice down payment to get us a swimming pool. I mean, does anybody know what's in these lakes since part of that was a dump? Could there be paint cans, could there be roofing shingles? What is in the bottom of these lakes, and people are doing their fishing and eating this fish? Does that open us up for a lawsuit that someone's gonna get sick from eating these out of this park? This is a swamp, there's moss greeny stuff that grows all over the lakes. And we're sticking more and more and more money in it, and it is wrong. So to ask for a grant, if they give us $100,000, we're only gonna spend no, it'll end up being just like this. We got $400,000 from a trust, and we've ended up spending over $2 million for this park. And it hasn't stopped costing us. And the people don't wanna keep spending money to get in. You wouldn't have hard if you kept having to make repairs. You'd get rid of it. We need to stop spending on this park. It is, I mean,
Okay.
I have to say,
We have a motion and we have a second for the resolution, I believe, correct? And if I hear nothing further, I'm going to ask for a roll call.
Alderman Heisler.
Aye.
Kinsella.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
Ridgewitz.
Aye.
Randall.
Aye.
Anthony.
Aye.
Davidson.
Aye.
Silsby. Hayden.
No.
Seibert.
Aye.
White.
Aye.
Gleddy.
No.
Musgrove.
Aye.
Orlett.
No.
Schneider.
no.
Ayes have it. I have no unfinished business, or I don't know.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I asked in city council, I have asked in sewer, to have a meeting for the people over in Ward 1 where the flooding and all that has occurred.
Yes, ma'am.
And we have not set a date for it.
And there's been a reason. Royce isn't here this evening, but I think the attorney will agree with me. We're going to be meeting tomorrow, you and I and Royce. We're going to be probably going back to Springfield in a few days. And that's part of the meeting tomorrow, to prepare for that and determine a course of action. And before we would go to the public and state a plan or a course of action, we need to get more facts and details from Springfield, the Illinois EPA, before we can address. We've had apparently several people have cited additional concerns to the EPA, so they have an obligation to contact us. We thought we were ready to go with action, and I would be ready to meet with those people. But we've had more complaints. Apparently, people have suddenly turned in concerns that hadn't turned them in before. So we're going to be addressing this in the next few days and next week. And once we have some definitive answers from the Illinois EPA, we will then hold some type of a public meeting when we know something factual how we're going to proceed with correcting those problems on Sherman Street and on Lucinda, et cetera.
But the people need to be kept advised that we are
I
working.
would ask
We
you
have not,
I would ask you, because the few I've talked to, we've told them this, and I would ask you to repeat what I just said to them, that we are meeting, we are working. When this first started and that heavy rain came, we since have had people call, someone's called, well, we think they've indicated to us who the one complaint was, the Illinois EPA. We've even had a call into the federal EPA. And when those calls come, we have to stop everything that we're doing in the planning side of correcting the problem to go on the defensive side of answering the questions, spending a day or two with the EPA's investigation, and we have to answer all their questions. So now, hopefully, we're going to get back to sitting down and coming up with a solution to correcting these problems, getting their approval, their blessing, and then we're going to ask the council to bless it, and then we'll come forward. But I would just ask you to tell any of those residents that we are working very hard in coming up with an acceptable correction and solution that the Illinois EPA recognizes, and we will be getting with them as soon as we have some definite answers.
but that's not what we told the people the night of the flooding. If we only had them here for 10 minutes, They don't want to hear it from me. They want to hear it from you and Royce. And if I would tell them, then all of it, well, I don't know where she got that from. I don't know. I didn't say that. I think it should have come from you. Monday, again, we were pumping at Sherman and
That's not a secret, yes, we were. And they called asking us to pump. The neighbors called and asked for those pumps.
Yes, but we need to tell the people over closer by me, we need to tell them what's going on. We don't communicate with the people.
Well,
When have you last talked to those people, especially the lady that was so upset that night? When I said, oh, we're gonna have a meeting soon. If it's nothing but to tell them the process. If it comes from the horse's mouth, it's gonna sound better than coming from me. And
no, as
you
I
stood in that
tell you,
lady's.
as soon as we have some answers from the EPA and we don't step on ourselves legally because of
Well,
some.
that's what I'm saying. Why should I? You should, or Roy should come explain
I
this.
think you just need to say for now, I would ask you that we are working very hard and diligently and we'll have some answers and be ready to meet as soon as we possibly can. And that is the honest to goodness truth. And then you can never be wrong telling the truth. Yes, sir.
I feel as though I know my constituents fairly well, and they would be most upset if they were called to a meeting that lasted 10 minutes, and all we had to say is, we have some meetings coming up and we'll let you know. The whole idea is you wait until you get the information you can give to them. And they are smart enough to know that.
And I think a few of them have contacted us and we've told them, we are working on this, but we're dealing with the Illinois EPA. And we're working diligently, I can tell you. As new as Garrett is, he's been in my office for at least 3 meetings, and we've been to Springfield, he and I, about this very problem, and he's only been city attorney probably for 6 or 7 weeks, so I can tell you, it's been high on our list of time we've spent. Is there anything else? If there's no, we don't have anything further. I'm sorry?
Second.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Hayden, second by Galletti. All in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
See you on Monday. Take care. All right. Won't be too long, will it? No, never is, man.